Hello and welcome to the Racing Room with AK Bets. Now I'm standing in for Hugh this week. I'm your host, George Elliott, as we look back to a phenomenal Cheltenham Festival. AK, come to you first. We saw a few stories from you in the ring, tweets sending out. Saw a couple of interviews on ITV as well, bit of a celebrity after the week. How was it for you?
Yeah, it was a really enjoyable week, George. It was just absolutely manic. All from Friday afternoon. We got our license to stand on course at 10 to 5 on Friday afternoon. Had to scramble on Monday getting passes. I actually thought our caseworker at the Gambling Commission was going to take a restraining order out against me. I was emailing her that much trying to get the license through last week. And we got it done, and we travelled over on Monday. And yeah, stood there on Tuesday morning for the first time, got to the track at something silly like 8 o'clock in the morning, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and yeah, got stuck into, I think one of the most couple of unreal races, and yeah, it was just absolutely brilliant. And as the week developed, obviously, as you alluded to, a couple of ITV interviews, which is funny, and a few bets as well. So yeah, it was all in all a good week, and I think we probably enhanced the people's awareness of AK Bets in the UK.
Tony, how was the week for you from a punting perspective?
Yeah, it got better as the week went on. First 2 days were a complete blowout. But yeah, ironically, the best result of the week was at Uttoxeter. And we'll come on to that at the end of the show. But yeah, the Gold Cup result was very good. Ended up backing on 3 or 4 different markets, the winner. But yeah, it wasn't a great week, but it ended well.
And Harry, you said on last week's show that you wouldn't be at Cheltenham due to other commitments. Did you manage to watch it?
I managed to watch Tuesday and Friday. I went down to the Brompton Cross in South Kent and watched it with people. That was very good fun. But yeah, no, I didn't make it down. I keep saying it, maybe next year, but it's difficult when you're also trying to pretend to be a lawyer, basically.
You can still take Friday off and go to the pub.
Can still get the. I mean, that lawyers. That's definitely within the remit of still being a lawyer. But I think leaving the M25 is where really it becomes a bit too much.
Anyone who paid any attention to the week last week will assume that the bookies cleared up. We obviously saw loads of beaten favourites, plenty of recreational punters doing their money, backing various multiples and the like across the week. Maybe not quite so simple when it came to your book, especially on Friday.
Yeah, definitely. Like I know people say anti-post is dead, and I kind of wish it wasn't, because I wasn't looking. So one of my guys in the race room was sending on our figures for anti-post, and this it might be past the sick bucket time, but we won 67% anti-post, which is fairly unprecedented. It's probably not off the biggest sample of all time, but it was gives you some idea of the amount of people that were rolling up favourites and stuff like that anti-post, and so from that perspective, it was really good. Tuesday was just unreal. We obviously laid Kopek the board, and one of the stories was we laid $2.5 to Paul Scholes, who was who would have grown up fairly close to where I grew up. He would have gone to the rival football school.
And that's no longer a breach of FA betting rules, hopefully, because the last time he was involved in any public betting didn't he get into trouble for being a director of Salford City or someone?
Salford, probably. He was manager of Oldham for a bit.
He was also manager of Oldham, yeah, but very short period, if I remember.
I got the first text message I got was off a pal of mine who is an Oldham fan, calling him all the names under the sun for only lasted 6 weeks, to be honest with you. But apart from that, that was interesting. We obviously laid Kopek the board online. We had a big price position just to lay that horse as the first favourite of the week, and that bit us on the bum, so to speak. And I suppose we were a small bit panicky, as I've mentioned elsewhere, just about the liabilities on day one. It could have been, looking back, if the 4 short ones would have won on day one, we would have lost an absolute fortune. So it's we did really well on day one, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse. I think the bets we were talking about were on the 4th day. It's actually quite funny. We've had some people, obviously it's interesting. I was saying to our guys, like, people it's fairly run of the mill for us, that kind of stuff, especially at a big meeting. And obviously sometimes one or two of them click. And I was saying to our guys, just from a PR point of view, I was saying that we should actually just tell people more about that stuff and tell the stories more. It's funny, you always get the 5% of people assuming that the bets don't exist. And then you also get the flip side of that is you get a few on-course bookmakers moaning about you talking about your liabilities as well. So it's you're always going to annoy somebody. But we obviously did the 100 each way. 150 is the winner of the first. And then one of our regular Irish clients who was involved in the horse Wonderwall, an owner in Sam Kerlin's yard, had 500 each way at 28s, and he was actually stood next to his mate, and he tempted his mate into have 100 each way as well. So that was fun times. Same customer actually bet the horse online in a single. I think he had another 250 each way online at 28s.
Do you hedge that stuff when you know that there's a link?
It depends. Like he'd be regular enough, and we wouldn't have done in that instance. There would have been. He was involved in Trixies and stuff like that. There was loads of different stuff online. That the fella has actually had an absolute touch out of us, and he'd be a regular enough guy and just an owner in the yard and has a few horses and that kind of way. So it depends. Like if sometimes you'd be a little bit more concerned with what if you don't know the people, I suppose. And there's a bet coming out of the blue. The first race, the Triumph, the customer in there would be fairly well known in Irish betting rings, and he bet two horses in the race at the same time. One of them just happened to be the winner. So it's just one of those basically.
And the other was a 200-to-1 place, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you said you could have got rid of it. Someone rang me up and I actually put a £5 bet on a Wonderwall for them, and it was 50-55 at the off. So obviously you've got the place part as well. You could have got rid of that, and Poniros was a big price. But it just led me on to one thing that's really annoyed me over the years is this narrative that because all the favourites get beat, therefore bookmakers must win, and vice versa. Obviously, if you're play it like you do, obviously that's not particularly true, is it? I mean, like you said,
yeah. You can actually see some of the on-course bookies putting their books up, and they vary wildly, to be honest with you. It only takes, like you said, that was one customer. The Wonderwall bet was one customer. The Triumph Hurdle horse was one customer. That one customer can pop up at the joint next door and not go to you. Like your books can be, it doesn't take much for your book to look wildly different to the lad literally stood 2 yards away from you, never mind at the other end of the racetrack as well. Obviously, I think personally, just given the sample size of bets, the online field books would look roughly the same. It's usually your favourite will be a big loser, your second favourite will be a small loser, your third favourite might be a small to medium-sized winner, and the rest tend to be winners, even if they've moved, they're not. And it's just because of the shape of the race and the volume of bets towards the off. Whereas on course would be slightly different. It's a much smaller sample. And your books can be wildly skewed from a guy stood 5 yards away from you. It can almost be a little bit of luck. The on-course is just fascinating because there was one bet we laid a bet of $5,000 at Majborough at 4-9 when there was twos on all around us and we were trying to keep the horse. So like it really can depend. You almost can't anticipate what'll happen. Like you can literally be on course 13-8 a horse, and all around you be 7-4, and people will bet 13-8 because 13 and 8 are bigger numbers than 7 and 4. Like it's actually really fascinating watching the different aspects of people that you're bumping into. You'd be trying to the story I always recall is that Mal McCartan, a bookie over here, standing at Cheltenham when Allaho won, and he was desperate to keep Allaho and pub 4-7, and the two boards next to him were 4-6. And the first bet he laid was $7,000 at 4-7 when the two lads either side of him were 4-6, because 7's a bigger number than 6. So you literally can't anticipate what your field book is going to look like. It's kind of, you put your prices up that you're happy to lay, and yeah, you just see what comes basically.
By the same token, he could have had that $7,000 extra at 4-6, couldn't he?
Oh, he 100% could, but like it just goes to show, like even. It's probably one of my biggest learnings online, even though we do a hell of a lot with price. Things that move the needle online don't tend to be price. They tend to be customer experience. They tend to be movability around your app, how quickly you reply to a customer service query, how quickly you process a withdrawal. That's what actually people the mass market, I think we all roll in circles where price is quite important, but for the mass market, it's probably it's one of the things that's quite far down the list, I think.
How aware are you of the online liabilities when you're on course as well? Like for example, with that triumph, you obviously knew that you were booing the winner, but
Yeah.
how aware were you of what you're taking at home?
Yeah, I can, to be honest with you, I kind of know what it's like. I think it's going to online, it's going to follow that same pattern. I think if there's anything out of the ordinary online, lads will be getting onto me straight away. And the guys we have in our room would be fairly well versed in what I like to see and what I don't like to see, I suppose. And if anything looks a little bit out of the ordinary, it'll be flagged and we confer opinions and see what the story is like. If a field book is, if someone's coming on for at Cheltenham for X amount of thousand on the favourite, it's going to get laid because it's Cheltenham and it's a favourite and it's fairly standard. If you have, yeah, that's just the way it is. Your field book's going to have a certain shape. If I went through all my online field books, I'd be absolutely shocked if any favourite under 4-1 wasn't probably the biggest loser in the book in that particular race. It takes something out of the ordinary to be flagged to me. That wouldn't be out of the ordinary. So yeah, it's kind of like it just is what it is, and you take it as it comes, basically.
And finally, how did you find your star turns on terrestrial TV on ITV? I thought you dealt incredibly well, given that one of your interviews was in relation to Michael O'Sullivan, which
Yeah,
was a difficult subject to have to cover, and especially given you're a bookmaker in the betting ring, it's not necessarily what you expected to be talking about.
yeah, 100%. Like it's like obviously we have the pitch. It's the front line that's on Tats. We have an online presence where the name of the game is we are trying to showcase our wares essentially to try and get people to sign up to the online. And we try and showcase that through one of the shop windows is the on course. ITV kind of approach different people that might be interested in the betting ring, and probably Loudmouth here probably is someone they probably pop over to the odd time as well. And obviously we want to be as front and center as you can. If you're calling a spade, if you're paying for 30 seconds with AK Bets on ITV, it's going to be out of my price range, basically. So anytime they want me to do anything, I'll beg, steal and borrow to get in front of that camera to try and help the brand and help us and try and make it engaging for the people at home so they keep coming back to me as well. I think when the first interview is on the subject that it was, it's for me, it's very awkward because I obviously want to try and like I say, you want to try and cross sell what you're doing online, and that just wasn't the appropriate time to do that at all. And just I was very nervous. I was kind of trying to anticipate what the end of the question was going to be, to be honest with you, as he was speaking, because I was like, I don't want to fuck up here, to be honest with you, because it's that important a subject. So I was fairly nervous. They also interviewed us after the Gold Cup, and I'm a hell of a lot more confident talking just about odds and bets and stuff like that, rather than other stuff. So it's but I was obviously grateful for the opportunity.
About 5 years ago, I was called into Sky Sports News to talk about what Chelsea fans could expect from Frank Lampard, and a 90-year-old Celtic player died whilst I was on air. And rather than ask me about Frank Lampard, they asked me for my reaction as to that news. And I've never been so floored in my whole life, having to talk about someone that I've never heard of before and just be like, yeah, it's obviously terrible news.
He had a good innings, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thoughts go out to the family and all that stuff, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at the way that the racing went, Tony, the final tally was obviously, Ireland dominated. Willie Mullins in particular dominated on Friday.
Yeah, it actually looked quite good for GB after the first day. I think they were leading 4-3, but then normal service was resumed. I think they won all 7 on the final day, didn't they? Yeah, it was pretty much as expected, wasn't it? Willie Mullins, 10 winners, just yeah. And there was a good smacking around all the other big trainers, wasn't there? Elliott, we'll come on to Elliott in a moment. He won on the last race on the final day, but stables that come good from Ireland, they came good. The Bromhead, Cromwell, Henderson and a couple. Yeah, it was, and Nichols, obviously, we'll come on to that as well. He needed a big winner and he had one. But yeah, it was, as expected, Irish dominance.
Any concerns over that? I mean, it seems like it's the same story every year. Maybe this year, as you say, a couple of winners, a couple of unexpected winners for Henderson. We thought we'd have a couple, but not the couple that came in. Are there any concerns?
Um, Not really. It's the way it's been for a while now, isn't it? And you look at the novice races, it's only gonna get more marked, I think.
Yeah, indeed, and plenty of very short-priced losers as well. Ridiculous lists, TC of horses that got beat over the course of the week.
Yeah, just looking at them now. I mean, when I was doing the list, I just couldn't believe it. No wonder why, the anti-post, you won 67% on your anti-post books, Anthony. You've got Madger at 1 to 2. Obviously, that was unlucky, but best horse in the race, but got beat. Constitution Hill, two's on. That fell. Brighter Days Ahead, 5 to 2 in the same race. Final Demand, 6 to 4. Ballyburn, 4 to 7. John Bun, 5 to 6. 6.5, 85 to 40. That was probably traded about 103 in the run, I think.
Yeah.
Tiapu 7 to 4, East Anglia, Dock and Lamba. I mean, that was if you weren't stupid and laid the win at 150s, I mean, most bookmakers must have taken the whole lot there, mustn't they? East India, Dock and Lamba, 5 to 4 and 11 to 4. And obviously then you've got Galopin de Champs. But yeah, obviously those are the list of losers. But the winners, we had Lossy Mouth at 4 to 6, Factifile at 6 to 4, Dino Bleu at 6 to 4. And if you're going further down the list, you've got Stumptown at 5 to 2. I mean, obviously, two of those winners were controversial, perhaps for being in the wrong races. I'd have loved to have seen what Factor File could have done in the Gold Cup. And obviously, the big talking point that caused a lot of friction behind the scenes with the owners and the press, etc., was Lossiemouth going in the Mayor's Hurdle instead of the Champion Hurdle. So I'm pretty relaxed about it. If there's a grade 1 for Mayors and a grade 1 Mayor wins it, then some of them, you put temptation in the way of people, they are going to take it. And similarly with Factifile, I think there was a bit of double standards because everyone went after Rich Ritchie a lot more than they did JP McManus, which probably isn't surprising. But yeah, I think it was just fascinating watching the week unfold.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you felt about this, AK. I watched the mares from kind of around the parade ring, and I can't really remember especially like a popular high profile horse like that winning a race like that with such muted reception, both in terms of when she crossed the line and being welcomed back into the winners' enclosure. How was it around you, and what are your thoughts on the whole debacle?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's probably an issue that should have been nipped in the bud a while ago. I think it's probably been done to death a small bit at this stage, but yeah, I half don't blame connections for bottling it, but I don't think they should have had the opportunity to bottle it as well. It should have been taken out of their hands. I think if you're leaving that door open, a few people are going to walk through it. It probably just creates a small bit like if it was an owner that just didn't have winners or something like that, I could really understand it. But I don't know when you've got more money than God. I think I'd like to think that you'd strap
One of the reasons why they said they went for it is because Rich Ritchie obviously he spends a lot of money there, and he's not a lot of the horses actually see the track, and that's true of all owners. And he's had such a bad season. Gaelic Warrior didn't even get there. I think once he got there, once he had an odds-on opportunity, given the seasons he had, I think they decided to take it. People can say they bottled it to a certain degree, and there might be some truth in that. But like I said, the same goes for other owners in other races.
For me, it just grates that you just leave it to the last minute all the time and just putting people away. It feels like you're just putting people away anyway, whether that is the case or not. It's highly unsatisfactory, I think, for punters.
Yeah.
It kind of made them non-betting events for a good while until a decision was made as well, which is not ideal. And I just think, just my old opinion is just you want the best horses running against each other. I think if on the form book the third best hurdler is ducking a championship race to win an egg and spoon race, I think there's probably something wrong. to be
Yeah.
honest. But
But do you not think that's one of the strange things about Cheltenham is that there's a kind of democratization of all the races that as long as you're winning something at Cheltenham, you've had a Cheltenham winner, and it's strangely not kind of there isn't really a kind of no one's conscious particularly of what races people really ought to be aiming for and are the more exciting races. There's just this obsession with having a Cheltenham winner, and that's 4 days and 7 races. It's just perhaps a bit too easy.
dilutes it, doesn't it? I think the chances you have in the Cheltenham winner have probably much increased, especially if you've got a few quid. But it's the prize should be winning one of the big races. It shouldn't be the mega spoon races. And I just think it's highly unsatisfactory just when the best horses aren't running against each other, whatever the circumstances are. And I think as a sport, it should tailor race programs, campaigns, everything should be tailored towards making sure the best horses run against each other. And if there's anything getting in the way of that, be it too many races, too many options for Grade 1 horses, too many race course gallops, so they're not actually running in races, I'd be getting rid of all the obstacles to the best horses running against each other.
Just before we kind of wrap up on the review, I mean, by the time this comes out, it'll be Tuesday, so we don't want to do the racing review, to death. But we should mention the champion hurdle. Obviously, the irony being, if Lossiemouth had gone in the champion hurdle, Golden Ace would have gone in the mare's hurdle, and we had that state man fall at the last, which would have been, imagine being on course must have been. Was there just silence there? George, you were on course as well, weren't you?
Yeah. There was stunned silence when Constitution Hill fell, and I was down in front of the grandstand, and it was a bit troubling to see the cameras that were shoved into both Michael Buckley and Nick Henderson's face basically as soon as it happened, and the whole stand just turned and looked at them, and I felt so sorry for them because the last thing they wanted at that moment was obviously to have the attention on them. And then when, I guess it happened early enough in the race that kind of the atmosphere built up again a little bit. When, visually at least, when State Man came past, it was obviously very impressive. And then for the fall to happen, again, just shocked silence really. And then a few kind of Golden Ace fans or punters kind of dotted amongst people absolutely losing their mind. But it was interesting because I spoke to Andy Holding on the Wednesday morning, who's obviously kind of a stopwatch man, and he said that the Supreme ran way quicker than the champion hurdle, and Kopek de Boer would have absolutely cleaned up in the champion hurdle. He even had State Man cleared the last, which I guess maybe pours cold water on the idea that State Man would have served up to Constitution Hill had he stayed on all 4 feet. But yeah, absolutely bizarre atmosphere. There's a question coming up later about bookies cheering horses falling, and I think AK may have just answered the question if you're watching this rather than listening to it.
Yes. Classy guy.
Let's talk
about. How about the attendances? Another big story to come out of the week. Ollie Bell interviewed Guy Lavender on ITV, the new Cheltenham CEO, where he was very. It was kind of politician's answer, I guess, wasn't it, Tony? Trying to point to the positives rather than focus on the quite stark dwindling numbers, especially in terms of Wednesday's attendance.
Yeah, I think they made it was. I think he dodged a lot of the thrust of the questions, and I mean, Wednesdays. It's something. The attendances is some we've been flagging up for weeks on this show, and the chickens really did come home to roost, especially on the Wednesday. I mean, they just shy of 42,000 on the Wednesday when they were getting 64,000 in 2022. And I know that was post-COVID year, but, it was still 5,000 down on the preview in 2024. So that was a staggering drop to 42,000. That's the lowest crowd ever at the Cheltenham Festival this century. So, yeah, it is a big issue. We'll come on to the punters' experiences after this, which was actually everything I've heard was actually very, very good because of those numbers people can get around, and even on Gold Cup Day when they had 60 odd thousand, apparently it was still quite good to get around. But Cheltenham have made an effort with what they're doing for the customer experience on the day, but at the bottom line, Jockey Club racecourses, they don't want 42,000 people turning up. They want 62,000 people turning up on that Wednesday, and it just didn't really deliver. And also, I mean, those figures are probably inflated.
They
Again,
really are inflated. That's the big key, that's the key point, isn't it, Tony? They kind of are inflated. They're inflated by the rewards for racing money. There's probably not many under 18s at Cheltenham just in general, but we know that they count them now as opposed to what they used to do in previous years as well. It's they are actually inflated when you're talking about people paying with their own. I just keep harking back to not so much a former life, but like when I was up to the age of about 25, whatever, even into my late 20s, I couldn't have afforded to go to Cheltenham there. Like it's like probably up to about 25. Like I literally couldn't pay those prices. Like you might have been able to scrape enough money to go for a day. Like I just think it's just gone so far. The whole expense of it, forget accommodation, which is obviously off the charts, just traveling to the track, eating, having a drink, having a bet, paying to get in. Like it's just so expensive. And where are the next set of fans coming from when you're just pricing as it is? It feels almost impossible at those price points.
yeah, it's they today they've announced the figures have dropped quite well. I think they're down six. If you buy now, they're six. The sales of tickets are 6% cheaper than they were this time last year. But as we've seen this year, people are going to fight shy of that and just say, look, if it gets to the festival 2, 3, 4 weeks beforehand, and you're getting 75 quid, 100 quid dropped into your risk for your rewards account, you're going to hold off. And I don't sure one of the group put for about in the toilets there was 50% off in 2026 signs in the toilets as well. And Jockey Club just trying to get money in. There's an entry initiative was announced yesterday where 20% off food and drink in the first hour of opening, and so they're trying to get people in early. They're trying to get people eating and drinking early, and 10 quid off bottles of prosecco and champagne.
I saw a funny tweet there. Somebody was saying, "You're getting 10 quid off a 6 quid bottle of prosecco. How does that work?"
But yeah, it's like I said, it's we'll come on to the customer experience now, but yeah, I mean it's their cash cow, and it's just not delivering at the moment. So they must be very, very kind of like very cautious about any triumphalism on the back of about how customers had a good time.
Did you see the story that was? I think it was first reported last September, and then it was again pushed out again before the festival about Cheltenham lifting the beer ban trackside. And then it wasn't the case. There was still the sign saying alcohol-free zone, and they were still getting you to throw your beers away as you walked in. So I don't know what happened there.
Whereabouts was that now? Because we stand in Tats now. It's obviously past the winning line, but
yeah,
it's the big thing. That's probably the thing that we've touched really lucky on is we bought our pitch when there was the booze ban was in place, and they've opened Tats up, and people were allowed to drink in there. Basically,
there must just be Tats, yeah, because around outside the alcohol bar, there are the bins there, and you get made to put them away when you walk in down past the.
But it's like but that is like the bookies in Tats just can't believe their luck. Basically, it's unbelievably added to the atmosphere. One of the bookies made a real good point that he's basically stopped people binge drinking. You go inside to get a drink.
Yeah.
By the time you get served, maybe not so much this year, but when you
down
served,
it and get out, yeah,
you literally have to down your pint really quick.
That's exactly the experience.
It's kind of like it's probably taken away from the atmosphere as well. But like opening it up, I didn't see any trouble in Tats. Like, and everyone had a great time, and all the betting was up, people moving around. It was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that was the experience I was kind of hoping to avoid this year. It's that cycle of you buy your beer, you've got about 10 minutes to drink it, you throw half of it away, you go down, you watch the race, you do it all again. Times 5, 6, 7.
Could you move in the alcohol bar this year, George? I mean, that's
just about.
Speaking, I mean, you can't.
No, it's still pretty busy. I mean, it's still a pain to get a drink. You still stand outside in that garden, and you're kind of basically in one big scrum. I mean, it's all you know what you're going when you get there. You don't go there for a sit down and a but the atmosphere was still relatively good. I think it didn't feel. I mean, I would say that it felt emptier on Tuesday generally, but I wouldn't say that the alcohol bar was reflecting of that. Tony, there were a couple of experiences, or good experiences at least, you've been sent for some good customer service points.
Yeah, I'll just read out one. I actually got sent, two. I think I got sent four actually individuals, just saying, look, you've got to stress how much a better experience it was this year because of the crowd numbers. Just read out one here. We were there, as for most of the last 25 years, on Friday only, travelling into Cheltenham on the morning. Traffic was better than previous.
Yeah.
Maybe still a bit more management needed. Car parking much, much better. Pretty much all hard standing now. Signposted really well. Lots of smiley, happy people directing them there to help. Likewise at the course, they've got lots of more very visible stewards and jockey club people who can point stuff out. We're in the Guinness grandstand seats, very well stewarded. Bar staff were grand. Guinness on the go like it is an old school Irish boozer. Almost no waiting, which to me is much more important than the £7.80 price tag. Loo seemed to be cleaned almost constantly, maybe to the white powder.
Must be off-putting.
But anyway, pretty much spotless. Going home out on the road by 6:15, only like 10 minutes to get out from switching the engine on, which is probably as good as it could get. All in all, they clearly made a big effort. Staff were smiley, looking to help, etc. Surprising how much difference that can make. So that's overwhelmingly kind of like good. The problem is, if it was too much of a good experience, if the crowds go back, they've got to make sure that
That's it, isn't it? It's the idea of less crowds, yeah.
Customer experience,
Yeah, we found it quite easy to get in and out of the car parks as well, to be honest with you, just on a basic level. People might laugh, but the toilet thing is such a big thing. I suppose it is I don't know if it's a bigger thing. Obviously, it is when the older you get, but like for an on-course bookmaker, it's an absolute disaster if you need the loo. Like it's you're literally legging it and like kicking past people to try and use the loo to get back out for the next race. It's carnage, and we had absolutely no issues in that regard. I thought the food options as well were pretty good. The independent stands. I was talking to a lot of the food retailers just from a nosy business point of view, finding out what they were paying to stand there and just interested in the way they go about things as well. And I just thought in general the food options were really good, with the independents and everything, and just moving around was good. And yeah, I think that to hark back to the betting ring, I think the value was that good in the betting ring that we actually flew someone over on Thursday morning to bet in the ring for the last 2 days as well. So come racing.
That's enough positivity. Let's get back onto the negative stuff now. AK, there was a bit of an issue. You did some filming with OLBG, and that was put to a stop by the Jockey Club. What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, it was indirectly with us, so it was it was put to OLBG. Or OLBG basically told us that they'd been contacted by the Jockey Club and had been the phrase used was politely but firmly told that they wouldn't be filming anymore on the track. And that scared them off anyway. We were going to carry on doing it. To be honest, I didn't know the rules, and I didn't want to. It's our first time at Cheltenham. I didn't want to step on too many eggshells there on our maiden voyage to UK racecourses. But I just don't understand it, to be honest with you. You've got that many people there. I just think, and some people like our content, some people think it's boring, whatever. I think if you've got people that are willing to spread the word and try and do interesting things on the racetrack, I just think they should be really encouraged. And I think from a Jockey Club perspective, you've got a lot of people there that are willing to that are promoting the product for essentially free, where it cost us four and odd grand to stand with staff passes and tickets to get in and stuff like that. So we paid 4,108 quid or something to stand for the 4 days with our staff. And obviously it wasn't us doing the filming, but to be told that we couldn't then film was a bit poor. And I think Jockey Club probably could clarify maybe what the rules are there in regard, because I'd like to do more stuff on the track and publicise people going racing a little bit more. And I think that should be encouraged just generally as well.
Harry, we had a question about, I'm not sure we got a question we definitely had a question in the commentary on Twitter or the questions thread, even if we didn't get a question themselves. What's the legal situation there? As it's their property, can they decide who films and who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that wherever really. You make it a condition of your access to private premises. You know, in the same way that the football stadium, you can't sit there and film it, and just then go and stick it on the internet. It is. I suspect that the real issue is that they've got people, you know, big bookmakers paying for big sponsorship deals, and they might be concerned that you're to an extent using the Cheltenham brand, even if you're not you're not showing races. But the fact that you're at Cheltenham is kind of in part what's bringing in stories. I bringing in viewers. I can completely see your point of view, which is that you doing it is not stopping anyone else doing it. But I just think that it's not enormously surprising to me that you got stopped from doing that in this day and age, and in the world of complex media rights agreements. I in a way I'm slightly amazed that ITV are allowed to. I don't want to spoil anyone's fun, but I'm slightly amazed that they are able to interview you with your lovely fleece on and that kind of thing. So I think, again, it's surprisingly lax about these things, and so compared to other events where, in other sports where it really is unbelievably uh, anal and controlled. I actually think, and I think it's a really good thing that they talk to the on-course bookmakers and that kind of thing, and have their signs up. There's no difference between your fleece and Dragon Bet sign. But in another sport, I'm not sure you'd even be doing that.
Didn't they, when Betfred used to sponsor the snooker, didn't they make them tape out any other bookmaker, any players that were sponsored by bookmakers?
There are lots of stories like that.
That'd be
exactly.
standard, yeah. That would be
Yeah.
standard, to be honest.
But listen, I can see your frustration in terms of growing the general interest in the sport. But I think having been involved in media rights deals with these big organizations, they're paying large sums of money, and it is intricate stuff.
And presumably, Harry, that there might be written into these contracts an exclusivity as to who is allowed to film on course. In which case,
yeah, exactly. I mean, you'll have been to events where there will be a presence of some company, some organization going around interviewing people and then going up onto the screens. I think Wimbledon does it, for example. Some drinks company or whoever will be going around. If they were to find out that AK Bets was at Wimbledon, not that's likely to happen in
Don't give me any
America.
ideas.
Thought,
I love strawberries as well.
AK Bet's wandering around selling dodgy strawberries and also doing media content. I think at the Lawn Tennis Association, or whatever they're called, will come down you much more quickly than this. So I think it's just, I'm afraid, one of the realities of kind of the media rights world that we live in nowadays.
It's not.
Sorry, AK, it's not what you wanted to hear.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not strawberries. Gemma Collins is eating anyway.
Yeah, her interview went down a storm on ITV. There's also I won't mention the trainer or the operator, but there was also a trainer who was interviewed live on ITV at quite a prime moment, who was wearing a branded sweater and wearing a blazer over the top of it, which covered the brand logo. Which I thought, if you were sitting as one of the marketing team watching that, you'd be absolutely livid. Given how much AK already said, that kind of primetime TV exposure would actually come at a cost, and that's kind of what you're paying for, I think, when you sponsor these guys. A more somber topic, of course, were the casualties over the course of the week. Corbett's Cross fell very late on, a horrible fall, and a fatal fall in the Gold Cup, and Springwell Bay also died off the back of made a mistake and was, eventually a fatal injury occurred. And, Harry, there was a bit of an awkward moment here where somebody posted a video off the back of that, with the horse appearing to be lame in the pre-race paddock. I mean, there seems to be a lot of people fairly well qualified replying to that video, saying that the initial information was fairly erroneous and there was no actual evidence for that to be the case. But either way, always a difficult topic.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised if that was not just a slightly misleading bit of footage. Who knows? But the BHA can't really be faulted on its approach to welfare nowadays, other than that perhaps sometimes it gets in the way of the sport. I don't think that I'd be very surprised, having dealt with various welfare issues for various trainers and jockeys, and how close they are, and how involved their vets are in these things, and the various checks that are done. I'd be pretty amazed at something that high profile in particular, if there was any sign, or any reasonable sign that that horse was lame. But we get back into the issue of the fact that horses die in jumps racing, which will come up again, no doubt, as hopefully less of a national debate around the time of Aintree than it has been in previous years. But it's the inherent difficulty that jumps racing has to struggle with, is that there were people saying that the Champion Hurdle was one of the most exciting races in years, and the reason for that is because two favourites fell at hurdles. That's why it was that exciting. It is an inherent part of the excitement of the sport.
Yeah.
And this is not to sound remotely uncaring, but this is the sport that pays for thoroughbred racehorses to remain, essentially, and to look after them. And it is not as simple as constantly, and I think we get on to starts again, which is, I won't make the point twice, but you can't. We talk about welfare being paramount. It's not paramount. It is certainly not paramount in absolute terms. It's paramount in relative terms, in that you have to balance it against the fact that you're trying to entertain people. Because if it was paramount, we wouldn't race them at all. And this is this thing that always I get so baffled by when we come around the Grand National nowadays, is the number of people in racing who've always been very excited about the Grand National falling over themselves to say, "Oh, I just hope there are no fallers." And you just go, "Well, why have you put fences up in front of these horses?" It doesn't make any sense. We've got racing needs to defend itself for what it is. Jumps racing needs to defend itself for what it is, not try and present itself as something easier to defend, and then to defend that, which is too often what it's trying to do. I think that obviously it's desperately sad, and particularly desperately sad for the connections of the horses. There has been, to my eye, and I haven't been watching as closely as I have in other years, less hand wringing over it than there have been in other major meetings, about the fact that it's perhaps gone back to the more measured response to this, which is that you watch, you look, you learn, you try and learn from every you should try and learn from every fatality or casualty as to whether things can be improved. But it's just a desperately sad reality of the sport, and it's not one that you can get rid of.
100%.
Yeah.
Anything
to add?
No,
I think that's spot on. Like, you're obviously hoping. I don't know. For me, it's splitting between the human and the equine. I suppose it's one is, in my opinion, one is vastly more important, and yeah, it's obviously horses are obviously part of the show, but it's fatalities are going to happen, and it's reducing that risk to as low as possible, whilst also accepting that it's inevitable, and
yeah,
that is it.
It's reducing it as low as possible while accepting that there is a counterweight to that, which is that you've got to keep the sport, in a recognizable format. And sometimes I would just want to think that we might be going the wrong direction in recent years.
It's almost the same theory when it comes to gambling and protecting problem gamblers. It's problem gambling rates are never going to be zero. It's the same thing. It's reducing it as low as you can, and keeping it as low as possible, and continually striving to improve in that regard. But it's also recognizing that it will never be zero.
Yeah.
And Harry, there was obviously a lot of drama around the starts over the course of the week. Very few going first time, causing a lot of frustration. Obviously there are some safety concerns here. I mean, there are a couple of occasions where they were sent off, and obviously jockeys and punters not particularly happy with the state of the race when they did so. How about
Yeah.
this?
I was just thinking of, but I wasn't with my dad. He's in Ireland at the moment. I was just thinking of the absolute rollicking the television was getting every time that happened, because the one thing he has always been completely unreasonably furious about is full starts. Anyway, so he had 7 of them. So I dread to imagine what was going on up in Antrim. But anyway,
My favorite tweet there was is it that Glenn Alco character on Twitter retweeting a French vet who was talking about how impressed he was with the start.
yes, I know. Amazing,
French
wasn't it?
phrasing. So it's again, it's all relative, I suppose.
Yeah. So one of the funniest elements of that was Lydia Hislop's interview with Robbie Supple and the is it the head steward, Tony, the other chap? Did you see it?
No.
And it is the closest you'll ever see to an interview becoming just a complete bollocking from the from the interviewer. And it literally ended with the words along the lines of "Let's hope it doesn't happen again." It was a proper telling off to
Sounds
both
like
of
one of my
them, and
parents'
they look,
demons.
yeah, exactly. They look very, very sheepish. Yeah, I don't want to repeat my rant of a few moments ago, but I hadn't realised that there was a huge welfare element to
Oh, I
this,
didn't
which is
know.
much like the Grand National start. They've become very concerned about the speed of the horses reaching
Yeah.
the first fence, because they think that regulates how fast the race will ultimately kind of be run generally. And also, I think they just think the horses are are overexcited sometimes, and they go at the first too fast anyway. But again, 7 full starts at Cheltenham does, the point Lydia Hislop was making is it does make the sport look rather silly to people who come in from other sports. And again, it's Michael O'Leary, I think he said health and safety gone mad in his usual measured tones. But I think that, we fall back into the same thing, which is that there is a balance between welfare and the entertainment value and underlying sporting integrity of the game itself. And those starts would suggest that, again, we have perhaps gone a little bit too far sometimes.
Yeah, I love my Michael O'Leary. I won't say a bad word against that man. Eddie O'Leary still wants 5 days at Cheltenham though, so it's polar opposite.
Do you reckon 5 days? Do you reckon 5 days or 3 days are more likely if they were to change it?
I think they'll do nothing and keep it the same, but it should be 3.
No, I know, but
Yeah,
but I
Surely
reckon they're more
go
likely
back
to
to
go
3, do
5
they?
than 3.
Yeah.
I think people are calling for 5 days still because they want to keep it at 4, if that makes sense.
Right, I see. Yeah.
If people give
It's
in,
tactical.
if people give in and say, well, actually, yeah, 4, it's more likely to go 3, isn't it? If you say, no, I want 5, people just say, all right, we'll keep it.
Do you not think that, if they're going to make a change to the festival, making the racing better on Friday would be a better, maybe from even a punting perspective? Like, I don't really, having the first race after the Gold Cup being the Hunter Chase just seems to me, basically when the whole world is watching, a kind of strange way to.
They might do something with the Wednesday because you've got the bumper, you've got the cross.
Yeah, I think Wednesday's I always think Wednesday's the worst day of me, but probably reflected in the crowds maybe as well. But
Yeah.
I just think always after the championship race, it just tails off no matter what bloody day it is, to be honest with you. I think it's, yeah, that'd be my opinion. I think you could have such an unbelievable 3 days of racing still, despite everything, if it was structured properly. But yeah, it just feels like there's always some kind of padding, no matter what day it is, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you had 3 days, you'd be paying 160, 170 quid for a ticket, though, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but only 3 times.
Yeah. So if they lop a day off,
it's not.
If they lop a day off and they have to make the same kind of money, they're going to increase.
They have to though, and they're not just going to have diminishing. Is money just not going to continue to?
I don't think things like the law of diminishing returns have ever been thought about by anyone in racing ever.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you have to increase it anyway. I wouldn't advocate for that, but I think I think people paying less for 3 days and it being full on every day would be much more preferable than the way it is now.
Yeah.
And I guess it probably doesn't also help that, ITV don't even show the last race of the day, do they? So in terms of kind of keeping interest going until the end of the card, when it basically gets turned off, there are probably people watching at home all week who don't even know there is a race that comes on, and the seventh race of the day.
Honestly, the betting ring on Wednesday for the last race was an incredible scene for Cheltenham. There was nobody there. Like it was everybody cleared out by then. It was very strange. Yeah.
A few stories now to touch on from the week. I'll go through them, and then you guys can comment on any that you feel fit to. John Hunt working for 5 Live after going through such not only horrendous, 8-9 months, but also the week where him and his daughter delivered impact statements over the murder of 3 members of their family earlier in the week. I think everyone involved in racing and not who is aware of this incredibly moved and impressed by the job that he did. He called as ever impeccably, and amazing to be able to carry out his job in that style, given what he'd been through. Just ridiculous scenes in terms of remembering Michael O'Sullivan with Marie Nationale winning the champion chase, and then Jazzy Matty winning the handicap later in the day. 2 horses that he rode a double on the Tuesday of Cheltenham a few years ago. It feels like the stars really aligned in terms of those two both winning on the same day back at the festival a few years later. And we saw multiple jockeys paying tribute to him, winning jockeys after crossing after winning their races live on ITV. Paul Nicholls and Caldwell Potter. Paul Nicholls obviously having a very tough time of it at the moment. Really needed that. Caldwell Potter, a very impressive winner of the newly named Jack Richards Handicap Chase. And then Gordon Elliott talking to Tom Stanley on Racing TV after Woodhoo won the Martin Pipe in tears and effectively unable to get his words out, and showing there, I think, the immense pressure that I guess people like Gordon Elliott are under in order to deliver a festival winner. Yeah. Anything you guys want to pick up on there?
No, I think you just run it for mate. I think if that Gordon Elliott interview would have been Nicky Henderson, everyone would just said he's tearful because he's pissed at the end of Cheltenham. But yeah, it was extraordinary, that interview, wasn't it? I mean, obviously the John Hunt thing is off the scale. Michael O'Sullivan, I think that was done really well by the course and the jockeys.
Yeah.
Paul Nicholls obviously was under massive pressure, and for him to actually win it with a horse that he's been ridiculed over, not least by this podcast, that was quite something. And yeah, I mean the Elliott stuff was just bizarre, wasn't it?
Surprising, wasn't it?
It wasn't bizarre, but yeah, surprising is probably better. Like I think everyone has that opinion, don't they, of Elliott? I think he's probably a bit rugged. He's a bit more one of everybody else. I think when you trainers, you're probably putting them on a pedestal. Maybe, I don't know, maybe socio-economic grouping wise, maybe. But Elliott just always feels like one of Elliott almost feels like just a normal fella, like, and I think the way it obviously got to him a small bit was that really surprised me, to be honest with you. Like, they say, it shows you. I think the one that just really resonates with me a small bit more is the John Hunt stuff, because I can't comprehend any of that stuff. Like, and I can't comprehend how he is. I don't know what the correct words are here, but like behaving as he is, because it's just incredible that, like, it probably resonates a little bit more having 3 kids and that kind of thing. And I just cannot comprehend how he is able to function as well as he seems to be doing from a totally impressive, like, so impressed point of view. And that's just exceptionally sad and cruel, I think.
Yeah, I think in the literal sense of the word, it's almost unbelievable when you hear him commentate. You just can't really believe that he's able to do it. It's kind of how I feel, like, immense. sympathy and all thoughts to him for going through what he's going through, and immense respect for the courage that he displays in being able to do the job the way that he's doing it. And
Absolutely.
obviously very, very different case, but a credit to everyone involved in terms of paying the respects to Michael O'Sullivan as well, because certainly it was a time that I think that it kind of goes unsaid a bit, but I think it seems like jockeys, especially over in Ireland, felt having to get on with their job during such a difficult time is obviously very, very hard for them. So it was good for lots of them to get the platform to pay tribute to someone who's clearly a dear friend and colleague of theirs. AK, there's a story around Cheltenham testing cash being used with vendors and taking a 28% cut from their sales.
Yeah, this is one of the things I think. This is something that I gleaned from talking to some of the vendors, I suppose, was that they pay. I didn't get a figure on the fee they paid to stand there, but the Jockey Club racecourses basically take 28% of the fee. And I was just talking to some of the vendors, just saying how that is potentially a little bit difficult for them, just compromising maybe on ingredients and probably charging prices that they're not 100% comfortable with as well. The food, like I say,
did any of them confirm that they were compromising on ingredients? And can we have a list of those ones?
But that was interesting because the person who told me that I'd actually just ordered off. So I didn't hold it against them though, because it was actually really nice. But
it's all right. I don't need the burger. Just give me the cake.
yeah. Just take the bread there, thanks. But I think it's just interesting that it seems quite high just as a starting point, and that's probably not helping from a price perspective. I think. I don't know how you would solve that economically to make it beneficial to both vendors and the track as well. But it does sound quite high for being charged that kind of unit commission price, I suppose. It's probably part of the overall cost debate, I suppose.
And I kind of thought this was almost a parody about this, but JP McManus in a column in the Racing Post advocating for reducing fields at the Cheltenham Festival, especially in handicaps going forwards, backed by the Racing Post. The only reason I mentioned Tony kind of parody is because reading the column, he talks about wanting horses to kind of be genuine in the run up to the festival in order to ensure they get in. I don't know if honestly, Turkey's voting for Christmas here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Racing Post have forged a new relationship with JP McManus. Lee Mottershead went out to interview him in Barbados, and this was an interview they'd done a few weeks subsequently. I mean, it was absolutely bizarre. I mean, we'll just do it very quick. I mean, the reduced field size idea, which the Racing Post all went along with, and in subsequent interviews on Luck on Sunday and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a very good idea. I mean, one of the things I do in my column, I do the balloted out horses. And throughout the 4 days, I had 71 balloted out horses. Obviously, they're all to the bottom of the weights. They're more likely to be lesser owners, smaller owners. And, if you reduce field sizes, you would have probably got up to about kind of 90 plus. It's an absolutely nonsense idea that has no merit. So I think the fact there's so many horses were balloted out, that idea would have been binned.
It's very strange, but listen, if anyone wants to give me a beano to Sandy Lane, I'll parrot some stuff as well if you like.
Yeah, if you fly him over there and put you up 5-star, you're not going to question what he says, are you? I suppose.
The only Sandy Lane I know is the home end at Rochdale. That's where I used to stand for many years, the old Sandy Lane end.
Yeah, I'll come with you gladly. A few rounds of golf sounds great. A few other stories, some of them related to Cheltenham, some of them not. But Tony, there's you wrote a piece on site on AK Bets on site on your blog on Sunday around the Uttoxeter grounds. Yeah, I mean, and I think there's been a response since around that controversy.
Yeah, basically it all stemmed from the fact that Cheltenham didn't give any details of their watering whatsoever. And Uttoxeter did the same. They watered for 5 days solid, and they've turned good ground into what some time analysts called heavy ground at Uttoxeter on Saturday, and I just thought it was pretty disgraceful. So I asked the BHA on Sunday afternoon. They got back to me this afternoon after I chased them up. And it transpires that a lot of the courses aren't doing as they are directed to do. The courses should, from 72 hours onwards, should be giving all the details, including amounts of water they put on the course, on the BHA site, and they're not. A lot of them aren't doing it. But I got some clarity from them. Fair play. They gave me a very comprehensive answer. And it's one of the few articles I've written that nobody has actually just had a pop about something, one aspect of it. Everyone agrees it's an issue that needs to be solved, and the BHA have given clarity here. So hopefully all will follow suit.
And a story from Bill Esdaile, who tweeted around a Paddy Power experience, where he backed the winner of the Gold Cup at a decent price, clearly won a few quids, and has been asked to take his passport into the branch before collecting his winnings. And he seems a bit miffed by this. AK, is this standard practice?
Harry might be the best one for this, and then I'll chime in at the end.
Before Harry, he did actually go in with his passport and get his money today, apparently. So he got it.
Good stuff. Yeah, this is a perennial complaint of punters is when ID is asked for or not. No, I can't see that this was likely to have been, every case with ID and KYC and AML is different, and there might be strange features of it that meant that they needed to. The likelihood is it's very confused staff over the various rules that are floating around at the moment. But the fact of the matter is they knew how much the bet would be paying out when he placed the bet. So if they were worried that this was some huge bet that they ought to ID him, well, that the point is, say, well, in order to accept your bet, we need to see your passport now, because that's the guidance from the gambling commissioners. If you were able to ask for this kind of documentation earlier in the relationship, then you should do it. Now, what the bookmaker will say is, well, it's easier for him to come and bring his passport to collect his winnings than if we'd said to him at the time, you're not getting this bet on unless you show us your passport, because he might not have had time to run off and get his passport. But I think really what it shows, George, is just the level of I'm advising bookmakers and various issues arising from these matters. Everyone's just really confused at the moment by what it is that they ought to be doing. There are some really worrying fines going around and explanations of fines that I'm seeing. And I think particularly in the smaller independent bookmaking world, where the cost of this exercise, the cost of trying to keep on top of regulation, is becoming really difficult, just because so much time is spent having to try and work out, including with lawyers, what it is that you do and don't need to do. And I think basically this is an example of probably a bookmaker or an employee of a bookmaker just spinning with not really knowing what it is that they should be doing in the circumstances. Anyway, AK.
If it was an island where I'm based, you'd have to give your ID on the payout side of it, because it's over £2,000. So so
that's a just hard and fast rule, is it?
Yeah, it's just the way it is. I suppose it's counter to turnover, I suppose, which is it's a problem for the industry, as we well know. I think it's also one of these things of people, like you say. I think there is confusion with bookmakers and all the different facets and subsets of all the different examples, and I'd be picking my compliance team's brains about why they're doing certain things and this kind of thing, and some of it makes sense and some of it I'd have a few questions on, but we try and obviously stick to the compliance rule of the roost, essentially. So it's if compliance said to do something, you're not overruling your compliance for any reason whatsoever. And they're trying to protect you at the end of the day. They're trying to protect the book. They're trying to protect the business at the end of the day, because it's obviously a lot harder for smaller companies to absorb fines as well. And I think it's also from a front end perspective, from a customer perspective, it's really frustrating. One of the frustrating points of the legal market is all this stuff. And if you
And it
flick,
feeds into this narrative that bookmakers are up to no good as well,
yeah,
because
it
they've
really
just
does.
been in.
It's even like as I alluded to a couple of weeks ago, the soft checks where if a customer is being returned red affordability after 100 quid or whatever on a soft check, and you're having to close them down, but you can't tell them why,
Yeah,
and you get a reputation of closing people down.
yeah.
And from a betting perspective, you've no qualms about it. So it's this mudding of the waters, I suppose. It's just not conducive to business and yeah, good experiences, I suppose.
It's possible also that an on-course shop might have different rules that it's agreed to, for example, but yeah, it's just thinking about it, but still, if it is what they should be doing, then it's, another bit of friction between customers and bookmakers, which isn't a particularly good thing.
Yeah.
Just skipping ahead quickly to one of the questions because it relates to this. Kevin Gaynor asked, reader bill is Esdaile Paddy's issue. I'll be interested in Harry's take on what they're obliged to do with his data. Are they allowed to share across Flutter Group and beyond, for example? And if he can have visibility on what it is shared and with whom. Cheers.
From a compliance point of view, I can't see any reason to share data with other bookmakers. They might be able to share it across the Flutter group, depending on exactly how the corporate structure works, and of course, what their kind of things like their privacy policies say, what their terms and conditions say. We live nowadays in a world where data is pretty carefully protected, and companies are not find it much harder to hand data around since things like the GDPR. Between each other, and it's really ultimately a balancing act between the reasonable sort of expectations of what the customer would expect you to do with the data and your reasonable use of it. So quite often what happens is that the Information Commission will say that, well, look, you might have had a good reason to use the data in that way, but your customer wouldn't have expected you to use the data in that way. And therefore, actually, the balance goes against you. I'd be very careful if I were bookmakers handing around data like this. Whatever, I think what we're talking about, what, a photocopy of a passport. It's very hard to see why they would. I mean, I don't think anyone's suggesting they have done that. It's the first thing to say. But it would be very hard to see a legitimate reason across Flutter, as I say. That might be a bit different, but I don't think they're going to be handing it to a Bet365.
No.
On to another story that broke kind of midway through the festival. Frankie Dettori has filed for bankruptcy. Harry, anything, there's obviously big news coming out of the world of flat racing.
Yeah.
All seems to be relating, as is often the case with when high profile people who you assume have lots of money file for bankruptcy to do with some kind of tax scheme.
Yeah. So we dealt with this at the time do you remember the bizarre attempt to keep his name out of the court documents? It has been. I've always had the impression with Frankie that he is one of those sort of guys who does rely quite a lot on a team of people around him, and that he likes very much to focus on what he does and leave things up to other people. I think this story suggests that is what's happened. I mean, even down to the press release that they've given recently, which is just such a clear bit of PR, because he actually goes so far as to, while basically saying, yeah, I was involved in tax avoidance, he says, and I would encourage people to stay on top of their finances. And he was just like, well, only a PR man can come up with that way of breaking the news. Is to actually, I'm the kind of this messiah of tax avoiders. I'm going to.
Do you think anyone will read that and think, actually, you know what? As of now, I'm gonna actually take a more control of my finances. Thanks
I'm
to
going
Frankie.
to immediately go and stop all my tax avoidance
Yeah.
schemes with this dodgy ex-porn star lawyer or whatever he is that sets them up for him. No, and it's just, I just think it shows again when was it David James who was made bankrupt about 5 times
Yeah.
over the course of his life, and it just shows you, I think, that these guys get paid so much money and they don't perhaps always think, although I think in Frankie's case it is a bit different because I think this scheme was just a naked attempt. How much he knew about it himself is another matter. According to Dan Needle, the tax expert, it does seem like a pretty starkly awful bit of tax avoidance that apparently ought to have been very obvious that it was a bit of tax avoidance. From going on, but I just think these guys rely so much on external advisors, and I think it's probably almost always that sinks them.
Did you ever see the auction that David James had to have of his stuff before he was made? It's unbelievable. If you get
what kind of stuff? Is it like his goalkeeping gloves and that kind of
No,
thing?
it was worse than that. Like it was the stuff he was buying for his house is like I can't even. It was so off the wall mad. It's incredible. He was only bankrupt 5 times, basically. Like he had
Yeah,
plethora of random shit that he was selling in some kind of auction. It's definitely worth trying to
yeah.
find the list.
If
Have you ever seen? Have you ever
yeah,
seen The Jerk with Steve Martin, where at the end he's made all this fortune, he goes bankrupt, and they just pull all this completely insane stuff out of his house? That sounds a bit like David James's bankruptcy.
if you remember, Frankie a few years back was selling all his memorabilia and stuff. So I don't know if he was trying to get a few quid together then, but yeah, it's absolutely bizarre. If you want to go and have a good read of that Dan Needle thread, I think it's Dan Neidle, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty damning stuff. And I think the other thing to point out is there are a few people just going, oh, he's a celebrity, bankruptcy means nothing. That's not right. Bankruptcy is a really unpleasant process in this jurisdiction. It is true that, perhaps his wife might have some personal wealth and, he might well be able to live off the kindness of strangers. And it's also true that he'll have earning capacity going forwards. But it is not funny at all being made bankrupt. You lose complete control of your finances. And basically someone else steps in and takes over the running of your finances in order to pay off your creditors. And Frankie will be no different to anyone else in that regard. It is not a fun process, and the fact that he's had to do it suggests that the money just wasn't there to repay these loans, and he's probably thinking to himself, well, it's actually better to go bankrupt now, and I've got a few years perhaps riding and then some further earning capacity to try and rebuild things. So I suspect that's why they ultimately had to go for it.
There was a story in the Guardian a week or so ago around the Gambling Commission investigating the Tote for their involvement in their own pool. TC, anything on this?
No, it's just Greg followed it up. Greg was one of the few people that followed the initial story up. We got sent a dossier from somebody, and the Guardian covered that. Nobody else did, to my knowledge. I think they did once on Nick Luck Daily, but Greg followed this up. I heard the same. So it sounds like the Gambling Commission are looking into the pools, the totes playing into their own pools, and what that means. Nobody else picked that up, which is surprising. But yeah, I think it's big news.
That will be quite an interesting little interview because I heard from quite a good source that when the Gambling Commission went to see the Tote, they had to explain to the Gambling Commission what pool betting was. So this investigation could be an interesting one to be a fly on the wall of.
So Tote having to inform the Gambling Commission what Tote betting is in order for him to investigate them.
Yeah, what pool betting was exactly. Well, yes, exactly. Yeah. You might have thought they have something of an advantage in this investigation process.
The BHA have launched a podcast. Anyone listen to it?
Nope.
Okay.
I will, and I will. It's not, but just haven't done. Have you, Tony?
No.
Our reign is over.
It's
I'm hosting.
If as long as they're being, as long as they're not kind of being too guarded, it's got to be a good thing. I think it's.
I saw a clip. I saw a clip with Brad Dunshee using the word deliverables, and I just couldn't face it. Basically, after that.
It's coming out every 4 to 6 weeks. Nick Lightford's hosting it. Look, it can't be a bad thing, is it?
No, no, no. And
If it's
only
bad, don't listen to it. If it's
we need to give it a chance. Yeah.
yes.
It's not the only new podcast in racing, is it?
Oh no, Francesca Kamani and Vanessa Binirala are doing one as well.
Yeah.
There you go.
Watch this space. We'll get reviews in future weeks for both of those. I think is
Yes.
Good
plan.
Good dodge, George. Good dodge.
And then a good news story with Paddy Smullen riding a winner at Dundalk on a 20-1 shot. The Dundalk where his dad rode his first and last winner. Poignant, this one, AK.
Yeah, definitely. I only caught the interview on Racing TV, I think it was. Yeah, and it's obviously one of those good news stories. And I didn't even watch the race, but I saw the interview, and I just thought the young lad spoke really, really well. He's obviously got a lot of cop on, a lot of smarts as well. So yeah, best of luck to him with whatever he's doing going forward. I don't know what the plans are, but I just thought he spoke really, really well, and yeah, wish him well.
He rode the winner for Dermot Weld, of course. His old man had some great days with in his riding career. A few questions now we'll rattle through before we can say farewell. Ben Keith, one for AK. How did average stakes compare to the DRF? And what were bet numbers like compared to the DRF? Did you lay horses and make semblances of books, or was it betting against one horse? And have you paid for the pitch in year one? A lot of questions there.
Yeah, no, it was really good. Obviously, we did really, really well on Tuesday, and that kind of really helped. Haven't paid for the pitch yet for sure, definitely not. But yeah, really enjoyed it. As opposed to DRF is it's obviously less bookmakers around. There's less. It's not as big a crowd, obviously. And we've two pitches in the ring at DRF. We've got one on a corner, which tends to do less slips but a lot higher stakes. And then we've one in the middle of a line in front of the stands, which is a lot of slips, but less of an average bet. So it's the two complete opposites, which kind of works well for us. But yeah, I just found the lumps and tats, just people with money, I suppose, lumping on horses was fairly unprecedented from what I've seen before, basically on the racetrack, be it Punchestown, Leopardstown, Galway, Listowel, anywhere. It felt fairly unique, and it's kind of whetted our appetite for buying a few more pitches in the UK as well. Because for whatever reason, be it online or other reasons, unsure quality of racing perhaps, there was plenty of lumpy bets knocking around. And yeah, I think average bet on some of the days, I think obviously it's skewed by some of the lumps and that, but we were talking nearly 100 quid, our average bet on
Wow.
Tuesday. It might have been 88 quid or something, which is fairly, you won't get anywhere near that in Ireland. Even if you lay a couple of lumps, it's kind of dwarfed by the middle order and the bottom order, I suppose. Yeah, I think maybe it's shape of race as well. You're just getting a lot of hundreds, 200s and stuff like that as the average bet. So there's obviously still people knocking about that want to have a bet and have a few quid, I suppose.
On to the couple of questions on the Paddy Power court case. This one from Adi. I know the Cheltenham is the main subject this week, but any thoughts on the Paddy Power £1 million court case and the racing media ignoring the story, even though the mainstream media ran it? The Racing Post actually ran a half-page article about the Flusher Group financial performance on this day. On the day the story should have ran this story. They can't say they only cover racing stories and a few more. It's a long question from AD. And then a lucky a day. Does Harry think the Paddy Power jackpot case could and should have any bearing on PALP rules for sports bets?
Well, this was a case where someone, I think she won over £1 million, didn't she, on one of these kind of games, and had the foresight to take a screen grab of it, as I understand it. So a palpable error is never a commercial error or just a mistake. It is something. There was the case of the ex-Scottish bookmaker who went into, I think, a William Hill somewhere up in Scotland and saw a mistake in the odds that someone, you just saw that it was a very obvious error, placed a bet on the basis of that, took them to court and lost on the basis of a palpable error. And the court said, well, no, it was obvious to you, particularly given that you were an ex-bookmaker, that was an error. That's the kind of error you're looking for with the palp. It's something that is, it's like having an extra zero on a 10-1 and turning it to 100-1. It is not, and it's been used by bookmakers in this way sometimes. It is not, we weren't expecting our game or our bit of software to do that. Again, unless you can show that it is something really quite extraordinary in the software that did it, I just don't think you're going to get home on that. She won, as I understand it, on what's called summary judgment, which is basically where you go to court and say the other side doesn't even have a defense judge. You don't even need to hear from them because they haven't got a defense. It's not the first time that's happened to a bookmaker. In fact, I don't think it's the first time it's happened to Paddy Power. And she won on that basis. It's a really, you do wonder with Paddy Power sometimes why they spend so much money on marketing and then do things like that. To lose at summary judgment suggests you've just not got the first hope of your argument succeeding. So why are you there? I mean, it's always difficult to comment on cases you're not involved in, and perhaps there are complications, but it has to be very bad for their image and for the game generally, because it's very seldom that people have these big wins, and having these big wins is the dream that keeps a lot of people punting.
This was obviously it wasn't. Well, I take his word for it. There wasn't covered. I haven't seen it, but the people the next day were on Good Morning Britain, so it did hit a mainstream audience.
Yeah.
The
racing press are constantly in a difficulty with that. I think to an extent we just have to accept it and stop.
Yeah, I think
really
as well. It's kind of like
complaining about it.
If you complain and the racing post aren't covering that, it's kind of that ship has sailed so long ago. I think it's kind of it just is what it is, and that's a commercial decision, I'd say.
Yeah,
would be my guess. But I just found it interesting. I've read nothing about this case, but I just wondered if it was a casino game that was built in-house, because it was a strange one that it went that far, because you'd usually be protected by some kind of clause with the provider of the game. If there was an error, they'd be kind of liable. It didn't.
Well, that may well be the next part of the investigation.
That he went to court. It was like, well, you might. Whose losses are you protecting here? Because it should probably be. They probably weren't going to be liable unless they built the game themselves. So it was kind of, I don't know.
Well, yeah, but your contract as the customer is with the bookmaker. The bookmaker might then have a contract with the game maker. They can go after. They might now go after the game maker and say, well, actually,
yeah, I didn't know
we
what
want to know what's happened here.
I didn't know what that relationship was behind the scenes, or whether it was like it's hard to.
But you do get these people. She's not one of them by the sounds of things, but you get these people who spot patterns in these games. Who play them long enough, and I've had people come to me with six-figure winnings from these games, from just playing them over and over again and realizing that a certain things happens at a certain point, and exploiting that. And it would be very interesting.
Hopefully, not doing any six figures in the process.
No, well, who knows? Yeah, but interestingly, on neither occasion that happened, I don't think that the bookmaker decided to look internally at the software, provided they were both external software providers. Yeah, that's I suppose a question for them, really.
Alan Conway asks or says the differing ground on the chase course at Cheltenham on Friday in particular, unless I'm mistaken, good soft all over was given, but can see that Jasmine DeVoe's time was 11 seconds over standard. Other hurdle race also over standard, yet Dino Blue and the Gold Cup are well below. Tony?
Yeah, obviously times vary, considering the kind of like the merit of the horses, isn't it? I think the Gold Cup was very, very quick, wasn't it? So yeah, I don't think anybody had a real issue with the ground on the Friday.
George AD asks, wonder what you will think of Betfair restricting me to £6.50 each way on Woodhoo without the favourite in the Martin Pipe. I only wanted a score each way. I'd won a few quid this way. Does the panel think they restricted me?
We don't know what his account's like, and what I would say, those secondary markets, the without markets, you don't get much on them anyway. So yeah, £6 at Cheltenham is probably a bit low, but you ain't going to get a lot on those kind of markets.
David asks, how are the trainers in the UK going to catch up? They say it goes in cycles, but the cycles will be between the Irish trainers, just between the Irish trainers at this rate. Kind of already covered this a bit. I mean, any ideas, TC, how they're going to catch up?
Hire 4 hitmen.
Might need
It's
more than four.
it's hard to know, isn't it? Though genuinely, how
Yeah.
it'll be reversed. I can't. How is it going to be reversed in the next 5 years? Like in any description, it's just not, is it? Like it's yeah. I don't know. Is it even going to get worse? Or worse?
Yeah,
Worse is probably the wrong word.
you had one English horse in the Supreme. You had none in the Browns advisories. It's obviously the new Lion one. Didn't cover that, but yeah, outside of that, the novices are just all Irish, all the best ones.
Mm.
Chester asks, question for all, is the race day simply too long now? With 7 races and 40-minute gaps and 4 hours from start to finish. Many getting there 2 hours before. From a viewer, it seems far too long and the atmosphere dies after championship race, understandably. I think we've already covered that one off earlier on in the
Yeah.
show.
One of the things I couldn't get over just in general was at 10:30 when the doors open, people running into the track. It was like
Yeah, I did.
it was like a very small version of Japanese racing when you see the gates open. There's people running in for seats and stuff. I was like, what are you doing? Like
Yeah.
it's 10:30 in the morning. So I think those people probably don't care about 40-minute gaps. But I know that when I'm
Those people have still not really gotten over Tim Henman retiring. They're the same. They're the same people.
It's a strange. It's the totally opposite to Ireland, where the crowd turns up just as the first race is jumping, which is the
It's
big marked difference from
it's the
UK
same at
Irish.
Royal Ascot. All the very well-to-do people who are in the Royal Ascot Racing Club and they pay 10 grand a year for it, something like that. They just get there early and just as soon as the gates open, they just sprint, and it's quite funny, you know. If they can get someone to sprint for them, they would do, but it's not an issue. It's not a factor there.
People just really hate traffic. On to Goody Who Racing. This is quite a funny, strange story. Vickers Bet sponsored a race at Sedgefield last week, an ITB7 race too, so very good exposure. Yet they wound up in February. Any idea what's happening there?
I would meant to check that it was actually true. But he's a regular supplier of questions, so I'm assuming it's correct. But that would be quite the something, wouldn't it?
It must have just been a case where they paid for it months ago, and
I'd say they did, yeah. Vickers were on the playbook platform, and then the grass was greener, I think, and they left, and it didn't go too well. I'd imagine Vickers will probably return in some form, but yeah, it's very strange that you're. Yeah, it's just very strange. I'm also very impressed with your pronunciation. What was it, Goodihue?
Goody
I would have never guessed that just by
So
looking at it on paper.
no, I didn't guess it. I searched because I wanted to know how to pronounce it. I searched on
well
Google,
done.
and thankfully he's put it in his bio. So
I just assumed it was Welsh or something.
yeah, that's what I thought as well. That's why I wasn't just going to try and say it without
Level
looking
of
it up.
threat, you're putting us all to shame.
I know.
But
A few more. Stuart Akis, what is the difference between bookies filming at Cheltenham and people like the Racing Blagger doing of it? There's another one on a similar line, another interesting name for blogger, WV Horse and Cricket. How happy was Hugh that a certain racing blog maker did his testicles? Hugh not here to answer that question. I did some previews before the festival with the racing blogger. Fair to say, yeah, he didn't have a great time of it, given the short price fabs that were beat. Any thoughts on this, guys?
I don't know. He's controversial enough, isn't he? But when he has a bet with me, he pays and it's genuine. So it's I've no real. I'm definitely not against anyway, to be honest.
But it's interesting you say that alone. I mean, I know him and I get on with him, and you know, I think one accusation that gets leveled at him fairly regularly is that it's all for show and it's all, you know, it's not real. And so if you do, you know, but AK, you've had experience and can say that it is.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely is. Yeah. The bets he's had with me are genuine, unless there's monopoly money in some of the bundles that we haven't found it yet. But yeah, he I probably can't say specifics because he might not want me to. But he when he has a bet,
Not like Paul Scholes.
no. One point. Paul Scholes put it on his own Instagram, technically. So
Okay,
there you
fine.
go. Back at you there. I was stumbling around there for an answer. But there you go. 1.1 million followers.
Yeah, Blogger has no issue normally telling people how much he's had on
No.
things. And it's doing content with him. It is absolutely remarkable, both how many eyeballs anything he does get, and also the absolute vitriol in the comments as well. Where some people just cannot stand him, and I'm sure they'll be happy enough to see that he did his money. Albeit, I'm sure from a content perspective, he'll be pretty happy with how last week went.
Does he just not care, George, in your view? I mean, is it water off a duck's back or that?
I think it is to an extent. I think there's a slight, he's a genuine racing fan and he's a genuine punter. I think there's a slight persona to Blogger rather than Stephen, I would say. But that's not to say that the opinions aren't true and the money's still there. He is someone who he bets favourites. But he's a massive racing fan, and even if if you're watching the previews and you hear him talking about a big field handicap, like he may not be putting winners up, but he's researched and he knows what he's talking about, and the access he gets, I guess, to these yards is pretty incredible. And I think there are probably people out there who resent him for it, who kind of would love to be in the position he's in. So there we go. The racing blog maker, as WV Horses and Cricket calls him. AK, from a lot off pro, is it inappropriate for bookmakers to cheer when a favourite falls at the fence?
It's a tough one, isn't it? It's I don't.
You meant to say no.
No, I'll tell you straight. Like I don't know. Like I think cheer is something that we don't do, but like I outwardly give it the big one. But I think inside you might obviously harking back to, especially from a jockey point of view, you're hoping jockey's fine. That's the way I approach it more than anything, to be honest with you. Listen, from a horse point of view as well, but for me, the jockey's more important. So from that point of view, that's always a consideration. I will never pretend not to be like, it affects me financially. It affects me. It affects my family. It affects my business. And if a good result, same as punters on the absolute flip side as well. I don't think you should be giving it the absolute big one, but I think you can have a little quiet smile inside that it's affected you positively, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Yeah, it was quite funny. I watched racing on Friday after I finished work in a pub, and Joe Chambers was there and quite a fair few others. Joe Chambers, Richie's racing manager, and Dino Blue and Allegory Devassi came to the last together. I think Dino Blue was getting the better of the argument, but Allegory Devassi fell, and one guy, literally 2 people away from Joe, got up and started cheering. And I said, "Well, you beat anyway." He said, "I don't care. I just wanted to make sure." And Joe's face was like that. So yeah, people do it, don't they? People do.
I giving it the big one, I think, is a bit. It's probably before you know everything's okay and stuff like that. It's probably a bit much. But like, I'll tell you straight, when Constitution Hill fell, I looked at the bookie next to me and we both went, do you know, like that? It's natural. Like, you're not gonna go, "Oh no, it's really bad for racing." I'm like, "Fucking hell, I've not done my brains here. This is brilliant." Like, it's so like that's what you're feeling inside, and I think it's the same for punters as well. You're not wishing any ill will on people, but it's massively affecting might affect your financial position for the day or whatever. So it's I think you can be happy about that.
Yes. Okay. So you can be happy. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably fair enough. As you say, I think cheering or calling for a horse to fall is different.
Yeah, I think that's totally different. Yeah.
To having an emotion. Yeah. Finally, a question from. I know we've got 2 more. Paul F asks, "How is it allowed that injured jockeys are allowed to ride in races without which the public are betting on? We all know jockeys will not admit to being injured in fear of missing out, but it's not acceptable. Sam Ewing had 4 rides with a fracture from the Saturday, the 8th of March. I mean, this feels like real pocket talk, this, doesn't it, TC?
I listened to his agent, Kevin O'Ryan, and it did sound like he was a bit tentative going to the festival. And I think they have got better passing the doctor, but obviously it's not as bad as the old days where AP McCoy went in with one leg missing and they let him ride. But I think it has got better. But yeah, it sounds like the Sam Ewing stuff. He did sound like he was carrying a bit of an injury going into it.
And finally, David Johnson asks one for all of you: how would you rate this year's festival out of 10? Harry?
Well, I didn't go, but I had a very nice time at the pub, and I'd give that a solid 8 out of 10. Watching it, I watched the Tuesday and Friday. I thought that, it's funny because you see that there was a few tweets, quite a bit of traction for these tweets going up the other day about almost a sort of Yardboo sucks you from a few punters going, well, one of the reasons that Cheltenham might struggle in the future is a lack of winning favourites. And that it got a surprising amount of traction, that mentality, and it might be a kind of a relatively modern social media phenomenon. I thought the Champion Hurdle was a really brilliant race from just pure sporting spectacle. And so I would say it was, and indeed that it was it was fun to watch Gareth Deschamps getting caught for me. But I suppose if you're a favourite backer and you do take that attitude that you sort of have almost an entitlement to getting a couple in, it was probably a bad one. But I thought it was good fun.
Yeah, it's strange. I think if all the favourites get beat in the Premier League, you don't not bet on the Premier League next week. That's just a very bizarre take, I think. But there's some people lap up bizarre takes all the time. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I'd say solid 7, which is very high for me.
TC?
I'd go with that. I mean, one of the reasons why I don't go anymore is if I did go, I'd just be sitting in the press room, head down, writing and just looking up the screen. So I'm quite happy to watch it at home. But yeah, I'd 7 or an 8. I really just get to enjoy it on Wednesday, on Friday when all the work's done. But yeah, I thought it was a very, very good festival. Yeah.
What about you, George? You were actually there as a paying punter.
Yeah, I think. Well, I was working, so I didn't pay.
Oh, were you? Okay.
I was going to say the least on a freebie to show.
Although, of course, it said on the back of my media pass that you're not allowed to drink or gamble, which is a bit of a shame.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I
so how many points did you have?
I can't say. And no bets either. I do find it amusing that you would say to a room full of kind of racing professionals in the media that you're not allowed to bet. Like, how do you think they all got into the sport? I had a great time on Tuesday. I think the Champion Hurdle was a massive disappointment for like in terms of wanting to see the race that we never got to see, albeit Punchestown is pretty exciting now off the back of it, given what Lossiemouth and Stateman did. I think I'd say it was an 8. I think I'm not necessarily a favourite backer, so all the shorties getting beat didn't bother me. Back to few winners, back to few losers, didn't come away too far behind. So yeah, happy enough. There we have it. This week's episode of the Racing Room brought to you by AK Bets. Make sure you check out AK Bets and got to get this right, the AK's Big Prices. Is that right? Yes.
Get on the website.
Get on the website. There is loads up there. I'm up there now, and there is all sorts up on AK's Big Prices across snooker, football, boxing, darts.
Hope you didn't pay a marketing consultant too much for that one, AK.
The guys will be back again next week, so keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Anything else to add, AK?
Absolutely nothing. No, good show, and thanks for stepping in.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
apologies for this being our longest
No.
Longest ever podcast for about an hour.
When you sent through the running order, I had to take half an hour off work in order to read it through.
We missed a week, didn't we? So I suppose that's our excuse.
Indeed.
No. Pleasure to do it. Plenty of sport and racing to get stuck into over the course of the week. So enjoy that. Gamble responsibly, and the guys will be back next week.